A reading from Genesis chapter 9. God blessed Noah and his sons and said, "Prosper, reproduce, fill the earth. Every living creature, birds, animals, fish, will fall under your spell and be afraid of you. You're responsible for them. All living creatures are yours for food. Just as I gave you the plants, now I give you everything else, except for meat with its lifeblood still in it. Do not eat that. But your own lifeblood I will avenge. I will avenge it against both animals and other humans.
Whoever sheds human blood, by humans let their blood be shed, because God made humans in God's image, reflecting God's very nature. You're here to bear fruit, reproduce, lavish life on the earth, live bountifully."
Then God spoke to Noah and his sons. I'm setting up my covenant with you, including your children who will come after you, along with everything alive around you, birds, farm animals, wild animals that came out of the ship with you. I'm setting up my covenant with you that never again will anything living be destroyed by floodwaters. No, never again will a flood destroy the earth.
God continued, "This is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and everything living around you and everyone living after you. I'm putting my rainbow in the clouds, a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. From now on, when I form a cloud over the earth and the rainbow appears in the cloud, I'll remember my covenant between me and you and everything living, that never again will floodwaters destroy all life. When the rainbow appears in the cloud, I'll see it and remember the eternal covenant between God and everything living, every last living creature on earth."
And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant that I've set up between me and everything living on the earth."
God is a great God. God don't never change. Singing God is a great God, and I will always praise God's name. God made the sun to shine by day. God made the sun to show the way. God made the stars to show their light. God made the moon to shine at night. Singing God is a great God. God don't never change. Singing God is a great God, and I will always praise God's name. The earth God's footstool, and heaven God's throne. The whole creation is all God's own. God's love and power, they will prevail. God's promises, they will never fail. Singing God is a great God. God don't never change. Singing God is a great God, and I will always praise God's name. And I will always praise God's name. And I will always praise God's name.
From Genesis chapter 22. After these things God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham," and he said, "Here I am." He said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you." So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offerings, and sent out and went to the place in the distance that God had shown him. On the 3rd day Abraham looked up and saw the place far away.
Then Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. So the two of them walked on together. Isaac said to his father Abraham, "Father!" And he said, "Here I am, my son." He said, "The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God himself will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." So the two of them walked on together.
When they came to the place that God had shown him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Here I am." He said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me."
And Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." As it is said to this day, "On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided."
Just as I am without one plea, but that your blood was shed for me, and that you called inviting me, O Lamb of God, I come, just as I am, your love unknown has broken every barrier down, now to be yours and yours alone, O Lamb of God, I come, I come.
From Exodus chapter 12. God said to Moses and Aaron while still in Egypt, "This month is to be the first month of the year for you. Address the whole community of Israel. Tell them that on the 10th of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one lamb to a house. If the family is too small for a lamb, then share it with a close neighbor, depending on the number of persons involved. Be mindful of how much each person will eat. Your lamb must be a healthy male, 1 year old. You can select it from either the sheep or the goats. Keep it penned until the 14th day of this month and then slaughter it. The entire community of Israel will do this at dusk.
Then take some of the blood and smear it on your 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which you will eat it. You are to eat the meat roasted in the fire that night, along with the bread made without yeast and bitter herbs. Don't eat any of it raw or boiled in water. Make sure it's roasted, the whole animal, head, legs, and innards. Don't leave anything of it until morning. If there are leftovers, burn them in the fire.
And here is how you are to eat it. Be fully dressed with your sandals on and your stick in your hand. Eat in a hurry. It's the Passover to God. I will go through the land of Egypt on this night and strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, whether human or animal, and bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am God. The blood will serve as a sign on the houses where you live. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. No disaster will touch you when I strike the land of Egypt.
This will be a memorial day for you. You will celebrate it as a festival to God down through the generations, a fixed festival celebration to be observed always. You will eat unraised bread, matzah, for 7 days. On the first day, get rid of all yeast from your houses. Anyone who eats anything with yeast from the first day to the seventh day will be cut off from Israel. The first and the seventh days are set aside as holy. Do no work on those days, only what you have to do for meals. Each person can do that.
Keep the festival of unraised bread. This marks the exact day I brought you out in force from the land of Egypt. Honor the day down through your generations, a fixed festival to be observed always. In the first month, beginning on the 14th day at evening until the 21st day at evening, you are to eat unraised bread. For those 7 days, not a trace of yeast is to be found in your houses. Anyone, whether a visitor or a native of the land, who eats anything raised shall be cut off from the community of Israel. Don't eat anything raised, only matzah.
Moses assembled all the elders of Israel. He said, "Select a lamb for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the bowl of blood and smear it on the lintel and on the doorposts. No one is to leave the house until morning. God will pass through to strike Egypt down. When God sees the blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts, God will pass over the doorway. God won't let the destroyer enter your house to strike you down with ruin."
Keep this word. It's the law for you and your children forever. When you enter the land which God will give you as promised, keep doing this. And when your children say to you, "Why are you doing this?" tell them, "It's the Passover sacrifice to God, who passed over the homes of the Israelites in Egypt when God hit Egypt with death, but rescued us." The people bowed and worshiped.
The Israelites then went and did what God had commanded Moses and Aaron. They did it all.
When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. Oh, 'twas a dark and dismal night. Let my people go. When Moses led the Israelites, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. We need not ever weep and mourn. Let my people go. Oh, where these chains of slavery borne, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go.
From John chapter 12. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. The next day the great crowd that had come to the festival heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, shouting,
Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel.
Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it. As it is written, Do not be afraid, daughter of Zion. Look, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt.
His disciples did not understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that these things had been written of him and had been done to him. So the crowd that had been with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to testify. It was also because they heard that he had performed this sign that the crowd went out to meet him. The Pharisees then said to one another, You see, you can do nothing. Look, the world has gone after him.
Ride on, King Jesus, no man can hinder me. Ride on, King Jesus, ride on, no man can hinder me. No man can hinder. In the great kingdom of morning, fare thee well, fare thee well. In the great kingdom of morning, fare thee well, fare thee well. Ride on, King Jesus, no man can hinder me. Ride on, King Jesus, ride on, no man can hinder me. 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 No man can hinder me.
From Matthew chapter 26. When Jesus finished saying these things, he told his disciples, You know that Passover comes in 2 days. That's when the Son of Man will be betrayed and handed over for crucifixion.
At that very moment, the party of high priests and religious leaders was meeting in the chambers of the chief priest named Caiaphas, conspiring to seize Jesus by stealth and kill him. They agreed that it should not be done during Passover week. We don't want a riot on our hands, they said.
When Jesus was at Bethany, a guest of Simon the leper, a woman came up to him as he was eating dinner and anointed him with a bottle of very expensive perfume. When the disciples saw what was happening, they were furious. That's criminal. This could have been sold for a lot and the money handed out to the poor.
When Jesus realized what was going on, he intervened. Why are you giving this woman a hard time? She has just done something wonderfully significant for me. You will have the poor with you every day for the rest of your lives, but not me. When she poured this perfume on my body, what she really did was anoint me for burial. You can be sure that wherever in the whole world the message is preached, what she has just done is going to be remembered and admired.
That is when one of the 12, the one named Judas Iscariot, went to the council of high priests and said, What will you give me if I hand him over to you? They settled on 30 silver pieces. He began looking for just the right moment to hand him over.
On the first day of the days of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and said, Where do you want us to prepare your Passover meal? He said, Enter the city, go up to a certain man and say, The teacher says, My time is near, and my disciples plan to celebrate the Passover meal at your house. The disciples followed Jesus' instruction to the letter and prepared the Passover meal.
After sunset, he and the 12 were sitting around the table. During the meal, he said, I have something hard but important to say to you. One of you is going to hand me over to the conspirators. They were stunned and began to ask one another, It isn't me, is it, Master?
Jesus answered, The one who hands me over is someone I eat with daily, someone who passes me food at the table. In one sense, the Son of Man is entering into a way of treachery, well marked by the Scriptures. No surprises here. In another sense, that one who turns him in turns traitor to the Son of Man. Better never to have been born than to do this. Then Judas, already turned traitor, said, "It isn't me, is it, Rabbi?" Jesus said, "Don't play games with me, Judas."
Then Jesus went with them to a garden called Gethsemane and told his disciples, "Stay here while I go over there and pray." Taking along Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he plunged into an agonizing sorrow. Then he said, "This sorrow is crushing my life out. Stay here and keep vigil with me."
Going a little ahead, he fell on his face, praying, "Abba, if there is any way, get me out of this. But please, not what I want. What do you want?" When he came back to his disciples, he found them sound asleep. He said to Peter, "Can't you stick it out with me a single hour? Stay alert. Be in prayer so you don't wander into temptation without even knowing you're in danger. There is a part of you that is eager, ready for anything in God. But there's another part that's as lazy as an old dog sleeping by the fire."
He then left them a second time. Again he prayed, "Abba, if there is no other way than this, drinking this cup to the dregs, I'm ready. Do it your way." When he came back, he again found them sound asleep. They simply couldn't keep their eyes open. This time he let them sleep on and went back a third time to pray, going over the same ground one last time.
When he came back the next time, he said, "Are you going to sleep on and make a night of it? My time is up. The Son of Man is about to be handed over to the hands of sinners. Get up, let's get going. My betrayer is here."
Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows my sorrow. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Glory, hallelujah. Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down. Oh, yes, Lord. Sometimes I'm almost to the ground. Oh, yes, Lord. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Glory, hallelujah.
From Mark, chapters 14 and 15. No sooner were the words out of his mouth when Judas, the one out of the 12, showed up, and with him a gang of ruffians, sent by the high priests, religion scholars, and leaders, brandishing swords and clubs. The betrayer had worked out a signal with them. "The one I kissed, that's the one. Seize him. Make sure he doesn't get away." He went straight to Jesus and said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. The others then grabbed him and roughed him up. One of the men standing there unsheathed his sword, swung, and it came down on the chief priest's servant, lopping off the man's ear.
Jesus said to them, "What is this? Coming after me with swords and clubs as if I were a dangerous criminal? Day after day I've been sitting in the temple, teaching, and you never so much as lifted a hand against me. What you, in fact, have done is confirm the prophetic writings." All the disciples cut and ran.
A young man was following along. All he had on was a bedsheet. Some of the men grabbed him, but he got away, running off naked, leaving them holding the sheet.
They led Jesus to the chief priest, where the high priests, religious leaders, and scholars had gathered together. Peter followed at a safe distance until they got to the chief priest's courtyard, where he mingled with the servants and warmed himself at the fire.
The high priests, conspiring with the Jewish council, looked high and low for evidence against Jesus, by which they could sentence him to death. They found nothing. Plenty of people were willing to bring in false charges, but nothing added up, and they all ended up canceling each other out. Then a few of them stood up and lied. We heard him say, "I am going to tear down this temple, built by hard labor, and in 3 days build another without lifting a hand." But even they couldn't agree exactly.
In the middle of this, the chief priest stood up and asked Jesus, "What do you have to say to the accusation?" Jesus was silent. He said nothing. The chief priest tried again, this time asking, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed?"
Jesus said, "Yes, I am, and you'll see it yourself, the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the Mighty One, arriving on the clouds of heaven."
The chief priest lost his temper. Ripping his clothes, he yelled, "Did you hear that? After that, do we need witnesses? You heard the blasphemy. Are you going to stand for it?"
They condemned him, one and all. The sentence, death. Some of them started spitting at him. They blindfolded his eyes, then hit him, saying, "Who hit you? Prophesy!" The guards, punching and slapping, took him away.
While all this was going on, Peter was down in the courtyard. One of the chief priest's servant girls came in, and seeing Peter warming himself there, looked hard at him and said, "You were with the Nazarene, Jesus."
He denied it. "I don't know what you're talking about." He went on the porch. A rooster crowed. The girl spotted him and began telling the people standing around, "He's one of them. He denied it again."
After a little while, the bystanders brought it up again. "You've got to be one of them. You've got Galilean written all over you." Now Peter got really nervous and swore, "I never laid eyes on this man you're talking about."
Just then the rooster crowed a second time. Peter remembered how Jesus had said, "Before a rooster crows twice, you'll deny me 3 times." He collapsed in tears.
At dawn's first light, the high priests with religious leaders and scholars arranged a conference with the entire Jewish council. After tying Jesus securely, they took him out and presented him to Pilate.
Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?"
He answered, "If you say so." The high priests let loose a barrage of accusations.
Pilate asked again, "Aren't you going to answer anything? That's quite a list of accusations." Still, he said nothing. Pilate was impressed, really impressed.
They crucified my Lord, and he never said a mumbling word. They crucified my Lord, and he never said a mumbling word. Not a word, not a word, not a word. They spat and scorned at my Lord, and he never said a mumbling word. They spat and scorned at my Lord, and he never said a mumbling word. Not a word, not a word, not a word.
From Luke chapter 23. As they led him off, They made Simon, a man from Cyrene, who happened to be coming in from the countryside, carry the cross behind Jesus. A huge crowd of people followed, along with women weeping and carrying on. At one point, Jesus turned to the women and said,
Daughters of Jerusalem, don't cry for me. Cry for yourselves and for your children. The time is coming when they'll say, lucky the women who never conceived, lucky the wombs that never gave birth, lucky the breasts that never gave milk. Then they'll start calling to the mountains, fall down on us, calling to the hills, cover us up. If people do these things to a live green tree, can you imagine what they'll do with dead wood?
2 others, both criminals, were taken along with him for execution. When they got to the place called Skull Hill, they crucified him, along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus prayed, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing.
Remember me. Remember me. Oh, Jesus, remember me.
Dividing up his clothes, they threw dice for them. The people stood there staring at Jesus, and the ringleaders made faces, taunting. He saved others. Let's see him save himself. The Messiah of God. Ha! The chosen. Ha!
The soldiers also came up and poked fun at him, making a game of it. They toasted him with sour wine. See our King of the Jews. Save yourself. Printed over him was a sign. This is the King of the Jews.
One of the criminals hanging alongside cursed him. Some Messiah you are. Save yourself. Save us.
But the other one made him shut up. Have you no fear of God? You're getting the same as him. We deserve this, but not him. He did nothing to deserve this. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you enter your kingdom.
He said, don't worry, I will. Today you will join me in paradise.
Amazing grace will always be my song of praise, for it was grace that bought my liberty. I do not know just how he came to love me so. He looked beyond my fault and saw my need. I shall forever lift mine eyes to Calvary, to view the cross where Jesus died for me. How marvelous the grace that catches falling souls. He looked beyond my fault and saw my need.
From Matthew, chapter 27. From noon to 3, the whole earth was dark. Around mid-afternoon, Jesus groaned out of the depths, crying loudly, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you abandoned me?
Father, I stretch my hand to thee. No other help I know. If thou withdraw thy hand from me, whither shall I go? Author of faith, to thee I lift my weary longing eyes. Let me now receive thy gift, my soul without it dies.
A reading from Luke chapter 23. By now it was noon. The whole earth became dark, the darkness lasting 3 hours, a total blackout. The temple curtain split right down the middle. Jesus called loudly, "Father, I place my life in your hands." Then he breathed his last.
It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon, while the sun's light failed and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying with a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Having said this, he breathed his last.
When the captain there saw what happened, he honored God. This man was innocent, a good man and innocent. All who had come around as spectators to watch the show, when they saw what actually happened, were overcome with grief and headed home. Those who knew Jesus well, along with the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a respectful distance and kept a vigil.
Calvary, 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 Calvary. Calvary, Calvary, surely he died on Calvary. Don't you hear that hammer ringing? Don't you hear that
From John chapter 19. Then the Jews, since it was the day of Sabbath preparation, and so the bodies wouldn't stay on the crosses over the Sabbath, it was a high holy day that year, petitioned Pilate that their legs be broken to speed death, and the bodies taken down.
So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first man crucified with Jesus, and then the other. When they got to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead, so they didn't break his legs. One of the soldiers stabbed him in the side with his spear. Blood and water gushed out.
The eyewitness to these things has presented an accurate report. He saw it himself and is telling the truth so that you also will believe. These things that happened confirm the scripture, not a bone in his body was broken, and the other scripture that reads, they will stare at the one they pierced.
After all this, Joseph of Arimathea, he was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he was intimidated by the others, petitioned Pilate to take the body of Jesus. Pilate gave permission, so Joseph came and took the body.
Nicodemus, who had first come to Jesus at night, came now in broad daylight carrying a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. They took Jesus' body and, following the Jewish burial custom, wrapped it in linen with the spices. There was a garden near the place he was crucified, and in that garden a new tomb in which no one had yet been placed. So, because it was Sabbath preparation for the Jews, and the tomb was convenient, they placed Jesus in it.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble.